That day, when my mother had just left the house, my stepfather also quietly walked out. I didn't pay much attention, just thinking that he went to work like every day. After breakfast, I started cleaning up in the kitchen, washing the remaining dishes. The space was quiet, only the sound of water running from the faucet and the sound of dishes hitting each other. I was so engrossed in my work that I didn't notice that a figure was approaching from behind. Suddenly, a rough hand slipped around my waist and squeezed tightly. The unexpected feeling made me stiffen. My breath caught. It was my stepfather. His breath was close to my ear, sending a chill down my spine. I tried to struggle, but that hand held me tight, not giving me a chance to move. At this moment, fear and a series of panicked questions arose in me. The familiar kitchen suddenly became cramped, suffocating to the point of difficulty breathing. And from that moment, my haunting story began. Hello everyone, my name is Lisa. I am 22 years old. I have lived with my mother since I was a child because my father passed away when I was young. My mother is a strong and resilient woman. She sacrificed a lot to raise me. My childhood was filled with love and care from my mother. Although our lives were not always full, my mother always taught me how to be independent and strong in the face of all difficulties. And I always thought that we only needed each other. Everything changed when I was 18. That was the first time my mother told me that she had met someone special, and that she wanted to take their relationship further. I was quite surprised because my mother had not paid much attention to love affairs after my father passed away, but this time she looked different. Her eyes were bright. Her smile was always on her lips. She told me that she wanted me to meet that man, to officially introduce him as part of the family. The day we met, I was stunned when I saw my future stepfather, Aiden, his name was. He was a tall man, looking much younger than his age. He was only a few years older than me, and even from a distance no one would think he was my mother's lover, but could easily mistake him for my brother or friend. He had an attractive smile and deep blue eyes, which made it easy for others to feel sympathy at first sight. But it was that youthfulness and elegance that made me feel confused. I couldn't imagine why someone like Aiden would choose my mother, a woman over 40 years old, even though my mother was still very beautiful. At first, I tried to act comfortable because I didn't want to upset my mother. But as time went on, I felt more and more that something was wrong. I asked my mother many times, "Mom, why did he marry you? He's so young. Could it be that he has some intention?" Every time my mother brushed it off and scolded me. She was serious, her voice firm. "Lisa, don't say that. This is true love regardless of age. Aiden loves Mom for who she is, not for anything else." I tried to believe my mother, but I still had doubts. Aiden's attitude was completely different. He was always polite and attentive to my mother. He even cooked, cleaned, and helped my mother with housework, something I had never seen in any other man. However, every time he looked at me, there was something strange in his eyes. It was not simply the eyes of an uncle looking at his stepdaughter, but rather something that was hard to put into words. I told myself that maybe I was thinking too much, that I needed to give him a chance to prove himself. My mother and Aiden got married after only a few months of dating, and he quickly became an official part of the family. But I couldn't deny that his presence in this small house had changed everything. Family meals were no longer the same, when there is always a strange atmosphere between us, an awkwardness that I cannot name, however. I dare not say because I know that my mother is very happy. She trusts Aiden absolutely. She sees him as the man who brings joy and comfort after years of loneliness. I didn't want to hurt my mother, but deep down I couldn't help but wonder. Does this man really love my mother? Or is there a secret behind that perfect smile that I haven't discovered yet? After a while, I gradually got used to Aiden's presence in the family. Although I was a bit shy and awkward at first, I couldn't deny that he brought a lot of joy to my mother. He often helped her with housework, cooking, and always maintained a polite and proper attitude. Everything gradually stabilized, and I also tried to think that maybe my initial doubts were just my imagination. One evening after a long tiring day at school, I went to the bathroom to relax. Since I hadn't had time to do the laundry, I hung my underwear up in the bathroom, planning to collect them and wash them with the other clothes the next morning. After taking a shower, I wrapped a towel around myself and walked out of the room to find some clothes to change into. But when I came back to get my underwear, it was gone. I paused, thinking that maybe I had left it somewhere. Still, I searched the bathroom, opening every cabinet door, bending down to look under the sink, but it was nowhere to be found. At first, I thought I must have left it in the bedroom. I went back to my room and rummaged through the pile of dirty clothes and drawers, but couldn't find it. A strange feeling arose in my heart, making me confused. The pants were clearly hung there before I took a shower, but now they were gone without a trace. After changing, I walked into the living room where Mom and Aiden were watching TV. They both looked very normal and comfortable. Mom even laughed out loud at a funny scene on the screen. I hesitated for a moment and then spoke up. Mom, Stepdad, did anyone come into the bathroom just now? I just finished taking a shower, but it seems like something is missing. They both turned to look at me, surprised. Mom asked, "What did you lose?" I hesitated a bit, not wanting to be too specific, just replied, "Yes, just a personal item. My underwear was hanging in the bathroom. Now I can't find it anymore." Aiden smiled lightly and shook his head. "No one went into the bathroom. Maybe you left it somewhere else." Mom agreed, "Try to remember. Did you ever leave it somewhere else?" Uncle Aiden and I were sitting here the whole time. No one went into the bathroom. I didn't say anything more, just nodded and went back to my room. In my heart, I thought to myself that maybe I really did leave it somewhere and didn't remember. But the strange feeling didn't go away, even though I tried to brush it off, telling myself that it wasn't a big deal. A part of me couldn't help but wonder, if I didn't leave it, then what happened to my underwear? Since that day, a strange feeling has always lingered in my mind. I can't explain it, nor do I know where it comes from, but it seems like there is an invisible gaze following my every move. At first, I tried to calm myself down, thinking that it was just me being too sensitive after the incident of my underwear disappearing. But that feeling did not fade away. On the contrary, it became more and more obvious. The strangest thing was when I took a shower. My bathroom door was made of frosted glass. From the outside looking in, I could only vaguely see the shape inside but not the details. But from the inside, I could still make out a faint silhouette of someone if they were standing outside. At first, I didn't pay much attention, but gradually, every time I took a shower, I felt like there was a shadow passing by. Not too clear, just a faint image standing in front of the bathroom door for a few seconds and then disappearing. The first time I noticed this was one evening. I had just stepped into the bathroom, turned on the hot water to relax, when in a flash, I saw a shadowy figure standing outside the glass door. I stopped, holding my breath, my heart pounding. "Who is it?" I called softly, but there was no response. I walked closer to the glass door, trying to get a better look, but the figure had disappeared. When I opened the door to check, the hallway outside the bathroom was completely empty. There was no one, only a faint light from the living room. I stood there for a few seconds trying to listen for any noise, but the space was eerily quiet. I told myself that maybe I was seeing things, or that it was just a reflection of the light. However, the feeling of insecurity remained. It didn't stop at the bathroom. In the days that followed, the feeling of being watched seemed to spread throughout the house, making me feel that no place was truly safe. Every time I walked down the hallway, I had a strange feeling that someone was watching me from behind. Sometimes I would turn around, but the empty hallway only responded with cold silence. When I sat in the living room, I always felt an invisible gaze lingering on me, as if someone was silently observing my every move. Sometimes when I walked through the kitchen or stood by the window, I would catch a glimpse of someone passing behind me, just enough to make me shiver. But when I went to check, everything was dead silent, as if nothing had happened. During the day, I tried to convince myself that it was all just my imagination, that this feeling came from my own uneasiness. Perhaps the light from outside or the objects accidentally created hallucinations that made me panic. But at night, when the house became quiet and the surrounding spaces plunged into darkness, the feeling became stronger. I always had the feeling that my every step echoed, not only in my ears but also in someone else's. I began to feel uneasy even in my own room. Late at night, while I was reading or trying to sleep, I would hear a faint sound outside my door, like someone walking past and stopping. I even went out to check a few times, but the hallway was empty and the doors to the other rooms were all closed. Every time I would just go back to bed, trying to dispel the creepy feeling inside me. I didn't tell my mother about this because I knew she would scold me for being too sensitive. "You're overthinking things," she would say. Aiden remained calm and composed as usual, showing no signs of anything unusual. But it was his calmness that made me feel even more strange. A coldness so perfect that I couldn't read anything from him. As time passed, the feeling of unease in my heart did not lessen, but on the contrary, it became more and more obvious. Everything started to repeat itself when, once again, my underwear disappeared in the bathroom, just like before. That night I finished showering, put on my clothes and stepped out to comb my still wet hair. I stood in front of the mirror in the living room, slowly drying my hair with a towel, enjoying the feeling of comfort after a long day. When I was about to go back to the bathroom to brush my teeth, the bathroom door suddenly opened, and Aiden walked out from inside. He was neatly dressed, holding a towel in his hand. "Going to get a towel for Mommy," he said, smiling gently as usual. I just nodded and continued my work, not thinking about anything else. However, when I returned to the bathroom, I suddenly realized that something was wrong. The underwear I had left on the hanger had mysteriously disappeared. I searched the entire bathroom from the basket to every corner, but it was completely gone. A strange feeling immediately welled up inside me, this time stronger than before. I tried to recall everything, and suddenly the image of Aiden coming out of the bathroom appeared in my mind. What was he doing there? Was his appearance related to this? At first, I tried to reassure myself that he was just going to get something for his mother, as he had said. But this coincidence made me unable to help but ask questions. I did not rush to say anything, just kept my doubts in my heart. But from that moment, Aiden's every action became the focus of my eyes, and the uneasiness kept growing, making me more and more alert than ever. After the disappearance of my underwear, I began to pay more attention to Aiden. Every gesture, look, and action of his were silently observed by me. But strangely, he seemed to know that I was paying attention to him. Every time I appeared, he appeared very calm, behaving properly as usual. That calm attitude, instead of reassuring me, made me even more confused. Am I overthinking things? Or is he really trying to hide something? Things continued like that until one day, everything began to reveal itself. It was Saturday. I had the day off at home, but my mother and Aiden still had to go to work. The morning passed as usual. Aiden woke up early, prepared breakfast with my mother, still smiling calmly and politely. After my mother finished eating, she quickly left the house to be on time for work. Aiden followed right after. Before leaving, he turned back and told me, "Stay home and rest. If you need anything, just call me." I nodded, trying to force a smile, but inside, I still had an indescribable feeling of unease. I finished breakfast, cleaned up the dining table, and started cleaning a little in the living room. The space was so quiet that I could clearly hear my footsteps echoing on the floor. Outside, the sunlight filtered through the window, illuminating the room that was familiar but, today, gave me a strange feeling. As I bent down to pick up a few things to organize them, a rough hand suddenly slid around my waist, squeezing me from behind. I froze, my breath caught in my chest. The feeling of surprise and fear made me completely unable to react immediately. "You're so cute, Lisa." A low voice rang out right next to my ear. It was Aiden's voice. My heart stopped beating. I tried to struggle, but his hand was tight. "Let go of me," I shouted, my voice trembling with fear. He didn't answer right away, just chuckled, his breath fanning over my neck, making me panic even more. "I didn't do anything. I just wanted to play a little," Aiden whispered, but his hand still held tightly around my waist, with no intention of letting go. His voice was a bit calm, but mixed with a coldness that was terrifying. The feeling of suffocation, the rough touch from his arms made me panic. I struggled harder, but he held me tighter, as if he was deliberately challenging my resistance. "What are you doing? Let me go," I yelled, my voice catching in my chest. Aiden didn't answer right away, just leaned down to my ear, his breath on my neck sending chills down my spine. "You're so nervous, Lisa." "I was just kidding," he said, but his tone wasn't playful. It was more like he was trying to calm me than to reassure me. "I told you to stop," I yelled, my voice shaking and angry. I tried to push my hands away from him, but Aiden didn't let go. Instead, his grip tightened, making me feel like I was trapped in a trap from which I couldn't escape. His eyes were so dark that they shook me to the core. "You're so beautiful, Lisa," he said softly, his voice full of intent that I didn't want to hear. I froze, feeling like everything around me was falling apart. Aiden hugged me tighter, as if to tear apart the feeble defenses I had put up. "I wanted you from the first time I saw you," he said, his voice low and gritted, but so clear that each word stabbed into my ears. "But I didn't dare, afraid your mother would find out. I waited until today." I stood there, unable to believe what I had just heard. "What are you talking about?" My voice was shaking, almost breaking, but I tried to keep my composure. "How could you even think that? How could you do this to my mother?" Aiden didn't answer right away. He stared at me as if struggling with something inside, but then his eyes flashed with determination. "Your mother. She's not the one I want. You're the one I've always wanted." The words hit me like a death blow, almost knocking me down. I couldn't believe that a man like Aiden, someone my mother loved and trusted, could say such horrible things. "Just this once, Lisa," he continued, his voice a mixture of pleading and determination. "Let me. Just this once. I swear I won't hurt your mother. This is our secret." I struggled, screaming in anger. "You despicable man. What the hell are you thinking?" But his strength and the fierceness of his actions made it impossible for me to escape. I felt his arms tighten, his breath close to my ear, making me suffocate. Everything seemed to blur in that moment. I didn't understand why I had no more strength to resist, as if everything was under his control. Aiden's words, eyes, and even his touch had crossed all limits. That whole day, Aiden and I had been together in a chaos that I couldn't put into words. My emotions at that moment were a mess, mixed with guilt, fear, and confusion. I couldn't believe that I had let things cross the line, allowing something to happen that should never have happened. Time passed heavily. Each minute and each second seemed to drag on forever, and I kept asking myself, how could I have gotten into this situation? When my mother came home in the evening, she seemed surprised to see Aiden already home. Usually, he always came home later than her due to work, but today was different. My mother put down her bag and looked at Aiden with a questioning gaze. "You came home early today? I usually see you come home later than me." Aiden, as always, remained calm and composed. He smiled, walked over to my mother, reached out to take the bag and replied, "I finished early today, thinking you would be happy if we came home for dinner together. I've seen you work so hard lately." His words were so gentle and reasonable that I couldn't help but shiver. He seemed completely free of any confusion or guilt about what had just happened. My mother smiled gently, not asking any more questions. She went into the kitchen, started preparing dinner as usual, completely unaware of anything unusual. But I was different. My every action, every emotion seemed to have changed. I no longer looked at Aiden the same way I used to. The person I had always tried to see as part of the family. My eyes became filled with hatred and resentment. But at the same time, I couldn't deny the feeling of shame and guilt creeping into my heart. Since that day, although everything between Aiden and I had stopped, I knew that this relationship could never return to the way it was before. Every day, living under the same roof, the feeling of fear and guilt constantly surrounded me like a never-ending nightmare. During family meals, I always felt Aiden's eyes lingering on me longer than usual. It was no longer the gaze of a husband towards his stepdaughter, but a gaze that made me shiver. My mother, who had always trusted and loved Aiden completely, did not notice anything unusual. Every time I passed by him, I tried to avoid eye contact, but in my heart, there was still an invisible fear that I could not dispel. Every time I saw my mother smile, her eyes shining with happiness, I felt even more like a traitor. I wanted to speak out, wanted to share this pain with my mother, but I did not have the courage. The silence was like a prison that imprisoned me in endless, tormenting thoughts. I couldn't take it anymore, so I decided to leave. I told my mother that I wanted to move out, that I was an adult and needed to learn to be independent. My mother was surprised at first, even unwilling to accept it. She didn't understand why I made such a sudden decision when I had always wanted to be close to her. "You don't have to go anywhere. Staying home with me is fine. I don't want you to live alone, it's dangerous," she said, her voice full of worry. But I was adamant. I told her that I was old enough to take care of myself, that this was what I needed to grow up and experience life. My mother finally agreed, even though she was still full of unanswered questions. I knew she didn't understand the real reason I left, and I didn't want her to know. When I left that house, I didn't feel as relieved as I had hoped. The pain was still there, burning in my heart. But at least the distance would help me avoid Aiden's eyes and the horrible memories that I always wanted to forget. Only I knew that this was not the first step to freedom, but the only way for me to save myself from the oppression and suffering that I could not overcome. Everyone's life has unexpected events and challenging moments. Sometimes we are faced with situations that we never imagined, but how we overcome them determines who we become. My story is a bitter lesson about facing vulnerability, guilt, and how to protect yourself from bad things. What I want to share with everyone is, never stay silent when you feel you are in danger, or when you are being hurt by people who are supposed to protect you. Silence can temporarily save you from conflict, but it can also become a prison, trapping you in pain and isolation. Seek help, whether it is from family, friends, or support organizations. Sometimes, speaking the truth is the only way to free yourself and start a new journey. Moreover, listen to your feelings. When you feel an environment is no longer safe, when you cannot live comfortably in your own space, that is when you need to make a decision to change. Leaving is not an escape, but a way for you to protect yourself, find peace, and heal. Finally, I would like to tell parents, always pay attention to your children's feelings and behaviors. Sometimes small changes in attitude, ambiguous words, can be signs of a deeper problem that you do not realize. Care and understanding not only help your children feel safe, but can also save them from the pain they dare not speak out. Life always has challenges, but we have the right to choose how to face them. Be brave and strong, because you deserve to live a peaceful and happy life. My story ends here. Thank you everyone for listening. Goodbye and see you again.